Hello and welcome everyone to this month's Creatrix Conversations. It is always such a joy and a pleasure to be with you every month in these live streams. And this month we have a special guest. And it has been my dream for some time to start weaving in guest speakers as part of these Creatrix conversations. And I could not be happier to have our first guest be the lovely Coco. So welcome, Coco Oya, Sienna Ray. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Flora. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So what we are going to be diving into today is going to be a very tender and vulnerable topic about moving through the long, dark night of the soul. And as always with these Creatrix conversations, I'm really listening to you. I'm really listening to the community, to the sisterhood in here of Awaken the Goddess Within for these topics that you're wanting to discuss. Like what's present and real for you. And so when this was suggested, um, I recognized the potency of it and the relevance, and even though a part of me was ready with March to burst into spring energy and thinking about the increasing light and the energy of the coming spring season, I at the same time recognize that probably now more than ever, as we just today are marking the 1 year anniversary of the World Health Organization declaring COVID-19 as a global
Mhm.
pandemic. This last year, um, plus or minus for everyone around the world has been incredibly difficult. And even though we've all had a different experience, we've all been affected by it. So I recognize that there was a need for us to dive into this. And initially, I was fully prepared to explore this conversation on my own. And at the same time, I then came to realize that I didn't feel like I was the best person to really speak into this, and I wanted to honor that truth that I am simply not someone who has experienced a long dark night of the soul, and I met Coco through an incredible writing program called the Divine Writer's Journey, led by Astara Jane Ashley of Flower of Life Press, and so connecting in that way as writers, um, then I read her chapter that is included in the Sovereign Unto Herself collection. And I just knew that you, sister, you were the one that I wanted to bring in to speak into this, not only to share your own story, but to speak to the broader scope of this. And so here we are, and thank you everyone who's watching live. I see we have some live viewers with us. Thank you for being here. And so Coco, I mean, just to begin, how you said you wanted to read a bit, or how do you want to open up
I
the
do.
discussion?
I
Yeah.
just want to first just honour the women that, reached out yesterday because I know it's a very deep um, topic. And I just want to honour that and just say I'm witnessing each and every single one of you because it's not just a straightforward journey. And it's not often talked about because we're expected to kind of know what we're doing along the journey on some level. And my journey with this topic, the dark night of the soul, feels like it's been a lifelong journey. And and it's something I've really been contemplating of the last week. And this week, because I lost a dear sister who took her own life, and I've been there close myself, and I just really sat with that and really honoured her journey, and felt it was something I've always wanted to speak about in more depth. And then, lo and behold, the next day, Flora reached out, and I just thought it's time. It's time to share. So, as Flora said, my chapter in Sovereign Unto Herself speaks to this, and the last kind of big descent I had with the Dark Night, to the point where I didn't want to be on the planet anymore. And I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs about the sense of why that was. So, yeah. This was a metaphorical death that needed to take place. The suicidal impulses too strong to ignore. I was being taken into the void of the Divine Mother, being asked to leave my body, if only for a split second, so that my soul could finally jump in, as death gently kissed me on my lips. So many of us hear the call to rebirth, but when this message is taken literally, sadly, many take their own lives. I knew this was something more. My heart in crisis, longing to surrender to the internal death and trust the wisdom and the rebirth cycles. A transformation that can be painful as we learn to trust the wisdom of the body and learn to shift our narrative from suffering to surrender, and from savant to sovereign, and from death to rebirth, from suicide to soul awakening. The journey is full of challenges as we shed our skins and become tender and raw. Like snakes, we go blind for a time until our new skins harden and our eyes adjust to the new light. We go through a period of being in the unknown, feeling unsettled as we learn to have trust and faith in the process of this metamorphosis. When we begin to shift into our greatness, when we finally surrender to who we are meant to be, there is often a lag time. It is a time when we have no idea what is going on as the soul reunites and descends into our bodies. We are in the in-between space, the bridge between spirit and our human selves, the emptiness that comes from relinquishing the old and stepping into the new.
Wow.
Okay.
I'm
And I
so
kind of chose, so go
yeah,
on.
I'm so glad that you chose that passage from your chapter, because I remember that that was that was a part that really struck me about shifting from suicide to soul awakening,
Mm-hmm.
and from suffering to surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the reason I chose those was because of the women that reached out yesterday, because I felt a sense of when we're in the down, we've been conditioned in our society to not to fear the down, to fear the dark. And when we're on our soul journey, we're not taught how to be comfortable with being in the down, in the dark. So often we want to medicate the magic that comes from being in the down, rather than relinquish and hold the medicine of being in the deep dark. And what I learned on my own journey was, each time I was taken into the descent with the Divine Mother, and it was the Divine Motherly energies, which was so compassionate, I had to learn to surrender, to let go of the identity that was so ingrained and etched in my skin. And I didn't know initially how to let go. But each time I went into the descent, the compassion and love that I felt, I began to love the dark, and I began to realize that it was the dark womb of the Divine Mother. Nothing to fear about being in the dark.
Mm.
And I had to change my narrative and language around that, because for so long I was told that I was a depressive, and that I was almost manic depressive because of the way that my moods went down. But I realized that is because the feminine is dark. Her true essence is the dark. And I embody a lot of the feminine. And we are in a time when the feminine has been either vilified or almost eradicated out of the field of life. And so to embody that, I realized that why my journey had to be so what I could see at the time as suffering, but it was only suffering because what I was surrounded with was the fact that people didn't understand that it was actually a spiritual journey. And that's what I will say about the dark night of the soul. We are in an unprecedented time, and it's the timing couldn't be more perfect. Like you said, it's been a year today since COVID hit. And for me, it was almost like a light bulb went off, because I'd journeyed with this energy for so much. I could see that we were entering a collective dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, again, this ignition that went on within me, because it was almost like this is the time when this magic and medicine is most needed, because so many will be feeling the energy of that without actually realizing, and facing a lot of death in their lives without really understanding the process of death and loss and surrender. Not just because through losing loved ones, but also the loss of identity that comes when we have to begin to let go of our own old lives and the people that the people that we have lost. And one thing I learned was that my grief, because I lost my partner 4 years ago, was so deep. And I initially thought it was because of the loss of him. But I realized it was the loss of identity of myself in relation to him. And also the fear of stepping into who I could be without him. And so my dark night of the soul this last one lasted for almost the whole 4 years, which is why I believe, again, I was almost taken down deeper than I've ever been before. And we can almost hold ourselves in a false sense of grief, because in a way, grief can be quite comforting.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because I got sympathy, I got love. And it was that I could still hold on to that sense of identity of the old version of me in relation to him. And so the fear of stepping into the unknown is what often keeps us in long, dark nights of the soul, because it is the unknown. And this is why I read that passage, because we are shedding skin after skin after skin. And just like we are going through a collective dark night of the soul, when we go through one on a personal level, we will not only go through layers of our own emotion, dealing with that, but for me, what I found, because it was so deep and because it was so long, we have to go through clearing ancestral imprints in there, collective imprints in there also. And what I will say to the women that are experiencing a long night of the soul is that there is reprieve. And some of the things that I learned along this journey was to love being in the down. And one of the best resources for that was a book called Existential King by Caroline Elliott.
Mm.
And that was teaching me how to love being in the down rather than wanting to medicate it or push it away, but really embrace being in the dark as something that I could love, rather than something that, because of outside conditioning, tells us that there's something wrong in grieving for so long, or there's something wrong in holding, in being in sorrow and longing. But as women, one of our natural things is to be in a state of longing. Yeah, so it was almost like twisting all the patriarchal kind of masculine way of looking at grief and emotion, and really allowing myself to feel the full spectrum of all the pain, because it's not just about this lifetime. It's about all lifetimes. And I also had a lot of trauma in my from personal childhood, but each time I went through the layers, and I think just before, in fact, while we were on the divine writing journey, I reached out to you because there was a big piece around the witch wound, and that was again around the conditioning, around being a woman and owning my power. And I believe that's another reason why a lot of women get stuck in the dark night of the soul, because to feel that layer intensely, it's painful. Mm-hmm. It's so painful. Yeah. And we get taught that we kind of have to do it on our own. And I'm so grateful that I could, you were writing about it at the time, and I could reach out to you and you could witness me in going through that. And what I want to say is, we're not meant to go through this alone. As women, we have again been conditioned into thinking that we have to do it on our own. Women naturally want to sit in circle. Women naturally want to talk and be witnessed in going through this. And I do believe the more we can do that, the less intense our dark nights will be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's definitely one of the ways that they've kept us from our power, is by keeping us separate, and then indoctrinating us to think that we need to do this on our own and to stay separate. Coco, I want to read some of the comments that have been coming through. Thank you. So true. The darkness feels scary and challenging, right? We know that. Another sister shares, there's so much grief when we grow and expand past our old stories. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that metaphoric death that we're all experiencing now, there's no going back to the way things were before COVID now. Mm-hmm. Even if things can look the same on the surface again, like it's not the same. There's only there's only new. And another sister shares, witnessing you, dear Coco, thank you for your vulnerability.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much truth here. And then more sisters agreeing, yes, we don't have to do this alone. Circle is so important for us.
Yeah, I just want to speak into one thing there around the dark, because I was terrified of the dark. And again, it was the indoctrination of the outside world that says there's scary things in the dark. But if we really tune into our essence as women, we are made to see in the dark through our intuition. But again, we've been conditioned out of that. And the way I made friendship with the dark was I began to look at the seasons and the cycles of life and get in tune with my body in cycles, and realizing that as women, we cycle, you know, we have an up, we have a down. It goes up, it goes down, it goes light, it goes dark. And then that's one way that we can begin to ease ourselves into walking into the dark, is relating and dropping into the body and understanding that we have cycles. And even if you monitor, you know, your cycles over 1 or 2 or 3 months, just to get into that flow, you see that there's nothing to be scared of going in the dark, in the downside of our cycle. Just like winter comes, we're allowed to be and be held deep in that space. And when we think of nature, it's a beautiful metaphor to kind of hold on to, which is seeds grow in the dark. And so if you, each time the fear comes up, just say, I'm birthing, I'm germinating in the dark. It's okay to be in the dark. There's nothing to fear. Mother is holding me in the dark.
Yeah. You're speaking my language with, you know, the metaphors that nature offers us, and something that I often like to remind people is that even when we talk about, you know, birth, death, and then right into rebirth, there's actually more phases between death and rebirth, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when a plant dies, then there's decay, and
Yeah,
then it composts, and
yeah,
then it, you know, the fields lay fallow, and then the seed germinates in the dark in the soil before there is the sprouting again in the rebirth. But we are, even with that, we're so quick to just go death right into rebirth.
exactly. And that's the thing. That's the fear that comes. Why we don't? Because the fear is when we begin to decompose. You know, there's fear there because it's stripping away the layers and the identity of who we were. And you know, my anxiety was just constantly like, who will I be? Who will I become? And so one of the things that I used to do, I used to buy myself flowers. And I used to watch them decay. And rather than when they started getting brown, throw them away. I mean, I used to watch them go into mush, to the decay, and just really embody and embrace the sense that things die, things decay. Like you said, things go into compost. It's and that's where the nutrition for the earth comes from. So these things that were falling away were things that could be transformed into new life. And so the negative things, I'll call them negative now, that I perceived around my fear, my anxiety, shame, guilt, all those emotions that we get told to kind of push aside, again, I began to embrace them and have almost like dialogue with them, give them shape, give them form, and begin to write about them as if they were a part of me, because they were a part of me. And this is the thing, these things can be turned into medicine. And another good reference for that is a book called Feeding Your Demons.
Yes, I'm
And
reading that right now,
no
synchronistically.
way. Yeah, I love that book because it helped me get into dialogue with all those things that we told to push into the shadows, and give them life and give them shape and be able to love them back into my being, because ultimately they were parts of my being. They were the parts of my soul that I had split off from because of trauma and because of grief and loss of identity. So yeah, sorry, I just love that you're reading that book as because it's a really good book. You
Yeah.
know, it's a really good book around, yeah, just owning those bits of us and consciously, like I said, we can take ourselves into the descent,
Mm-hmm.
um, because the myths around Inanna and Persephone have, it's almost like a map to show us. And there are lots of references out there about how to kind of engage with those myths. Because that's what it is. It's the shedding, going through those layers and then um, rebirthing ourselves as we reclaim those bits back in new form, in new ways, so that we can engage with the world again in a different way. We can begin to have clear sight around why we were in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. There's just so many different directions that we could go with this rich
Yeah.
conversation right now. But I'm feeling called to ask you about so you lost your partner, right? 4 years ago, you said. That's like a very obvious and, dare I say, acceptable reason for you to be in grief.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone who doesn't know why they're depressed, who doesn't know why
Okay.
they're in a long dark night of the soul, that hasn't had that obvious and
Yeah.
acceptable? Yes.
I will say, like I said at the beginning, that my journey with the Dark Night of the Soul has been lifelong.
Mm,
And so that was a major one, obviously. But the last one after the 4 years in 2019, when I seriously wanted to die, was because I had no sense of direction. My daughter had just left home. All my identity was related to mother. And then she went, and the house was empty and quiet. And I thought, I had this grand vision of, now I've got the house to myself. I'm going to make a reading room, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have all this freedom. And it was almost as if that wasn't the thing that I was feeling, because my soul wanted to come through. And I don't believe there isn't a reason um, why we're in a depression. It's because we're depressing something, we're depressing the feeling or the sensation. It may be that we're in a job that doesn't suit us, but we can't leave the job because it's financial security, or we don't have a clue of where we want to go, or it may be a relationship, or it may be just a sense of style, somewhere that you're living. There's always a reason um, for the dark night of the soul. And it's because we, when we're in those situations, we've come so far away from our authentic, integral self. So each time we move away from that, we'll be feeling a bit out of sorts, and maybe we can go along like that for a year or so. And then, we numb out a bit more. And then the feelings of numbness get deeper and deeper, and then suddenly we're in a deep depression and a dark space, and we're thinking, what happened? But we really traced and sat down and and this is why I say go into dialogue with it. What is it that you're trying to show me? And trace back where that first feeling came from. We can always find the reason why. But again, many don't. And I know I didn't for a long time, because I was being called to step into my power, and I didn't see myself as a powerful person. And but also I had no clue of what that meant to be a powerful person, or um, to really own what my soul wanted me to live. And now the irony is that the thing that I thought I was dismissing or wanted to run away from as fast as I could, which was this journey of being in the dark night of the soul and all these different scenarios that took me there, is the thing that's becoming the basis of my work. And it's like, it's like, and it's all, and that's why I said there's always an answer. The thing often that takes us into the dark night of the soul is the thing that our soul wants us to bring forward.
yes. Yes. And this is where I get really excited because, and our and I've been sharing this, that our shadows, our wounds,
Mm-hmm.
hold our wisdom, hold carry
Mm-hmm.
our medicine that we are meant to share. And you're absolutely right, just your own experience of how you were wanting to run in the opposite direction, and until you really sat in it, until you really faced it. And even now in this last week, receiving this invitation from me, and you're thinking right now, okay, this is a sign. This is
Mm-hmm.
a sign that, yes, I'm meant to speak to this more. Thank you so much for sharing about all that, because yeah, there is always a reason. It's just whether we're willing to um, to really discover it, to look at it, find it.
Yeah. And also when we see it, to accept it, because it can be hard to face the fact that you may be in the wrong place or the wrong relationship, or there's something that you're not feeding in your soul and you don't know how to do it, or you're scared to do it, you know. And I will say, to do that with loving compassion. I
Mm-hmm.
always come back to that, because there's nothing to be shameful about being depressed. The reason, and I think I may have said this, that we do get shamed around the word depression or feeling down is because of the narrative that we're told that there's something wrong with that. But it's the realm of the feminine. Women used to sit in circle at the moon time and go into the descent, go into the dark, go into the void. It's our natural way of being, and we've been conditioned out of that. And I know this is why there's so many layers, like I say, why um, why I know it's part of the work that I want to do in the world, because I want to bring back the appreciation of the dark, and the dark goddess and the dark feminine, because it's what will um, heal the world. The things that are going out in the world now, the reason why it's crazy is because we've been afraid. We've like whitewashed the darkness. We've pretended that everything's okay, and then suddenly the world stopped, and we realised, oh, there's something amiss here. But then we're trying to get out of it as fast as we can, soothe it with, whatever method to kind of get going again. And that's kind of what we do on a personal level. We'll begin to soothe, whether that's, with whatever soothing method, because we don't want to feel. But I do believe collectively and individually, it's time to embrace the dark.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other alignment with today, that we are in the dark of the moon. And this part of the lunar phase, that dark moon, has long been associated with the archetype of the witch, and
Mm-hmm.
the archetype of the wise woman, or the
Mm-hmm.
crone. And I love that you brought up that other layer of healing around this, because often when we can't necessarily pinpoint the reason for our anxiety or depression.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I can really relate, that the more I stepped into my leadership and into creative expression with my business, I was feeling this sense of fear and
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty. And in this lifetime, I couldn't trace back to anything that made sense. And so then it was like, oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
past life trauma. This is the
Yeah.
witch wound. And just yesterday, I led a very powerful witch wound healing session for a woman. And we went back to that, just that frequency, that energy of that time when it was not safe for us.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, 2021, sure, in a lot of ways, we have a lot more freedom. We do have a lot more safety in some parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's still many parts of the world where it is not safe for women. And so we're healing this collectively. Yeah, in a big
Yeah.
way.
In a big way. And this is the thing, when we clear our things individually, the next layer will come up, and that is often this collective wound. Because as we clear ourselves and become clearer about who we are as an individual, the next kind of synchronized layer is that our souls will want us to step into our power, into our purpose, into our full being, which means stepping into some form of leadership, which means facing that layer of, you know, the suppression of women and speaking their power and speaking their truth. And it's like, and which is why I say this is a never ending journey. This is why we need to do it together. This is why we're on it, because ultimately we will hit that layer. It's inevitable. You know, there's no getting around it. If you want to step into your power, we go through that gateways and initiation. It's 100%. It may just be, like you said, a small ceremony that we need to do, or it may be, again, something that takes you into the depth of another long, dark night of the soul, depending on what your soul is coming to learn and to journey with. But I do believe this is the time for it, because as the feminine is rising and more women are feeling that call to stand in that, in their full power, in their full essence, this wound is will, you know, will show up in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
You just you speak it so beautifully. You really speak so clearly and sensitively to all of this. And because you're absolutely right, it's not just the witch wound that we could label. So, some of you listening might not right now might be even feeling that fear
Yeah.
and repulsion to it. That's fine, but it's our wounding around accepting ourselves
Mm-hmm.
as powerful,
Mm-hmm.
around seeing ourselves as leaders. It's around our own conditioning, around how we respond to seeing other women in positions
Mm-hmm.
of power.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, right? It's
It's, yeah, it is big, and this is why it was like, wow, this is like, it's so big. There's lifetimes and lifetimes of things that you can look at. And I've just been through another layer, which was around the Madonna horse split, which I thought I'd looked at, around embracing myself as a full embodied sexual, you know, sensual woman. And again, it was like another like deep layer of looking at, wow, it's that's another form of the way that women's power is being suppressed, you know, put into the shadows, put into the dark. So I guess why I'm saying that is because, like you said, we want to specifically sometimes look at, it's almost like we turn it on ourselves and think, well, there must be something wrong with me. There must be, you know, a reason that I find that it's about my journey individually. But on top of that are all these collective layers of suppression, which, and the reason I think I'm saying that is because I want women to be gentle with themselves, because the pain that you may be feeling may not be from this lifetime, may not just be yours, may be a collective patterning that you're feeling in. And please be gentle with yourself, because if you are feeling that, there are other sisters feeling that, and we're kind of with you in that together. And and which is why I'm really adamant about setting women's circles, because the minute you are witnessed or are able to see that someone else is going through that, you understand then that this is a collective layer that we're moving through together as we birth, you know, the feminine back into her rightful place, her rightful throne. And when we do that, we can also let ourselves off the pressure that we think, oh, I'm not doing a grand purpose. I'm not doing, you know, I'm not out in the world doing a thing. You are doing a thing just by, you know, sitting in circle with other women. You're doing the thing. So be gentle with yourselves, you know.
mm,
You know, I
beautiful.
twisted myself and lost myself with that many times, thinking I'm not doing anything. And all the while I've been doing the work.
Yeah, and that is further around the split of our worth being tied to our productivity,
Yeah.
and us, you know, our beingness, being
Mm-hmm.
valuable, who we are in the world. You know, so it breaks my heart so many so many women, you know, that, oh, I'm just a mom, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
just a stay-at-home mom, and you know, as if they're not doing anything worthwhile with their time raising
Mm-hmm.
children. There's just, yeah. So I think this is a beautiful way to begin to close our
Mm-hmm.
conversation today, Coco. Thank you again. And I want to witness, you know, some sisters sharing that they're in tears, really feeling a resonance. So witnessing you. Another sister shares, this is a really wonderful, unexpected perspective. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank
And then, we just, yes, the difference between doing and being is so significant.
you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say, as I mentioned, it's a really potent topic for me at the minute because I have lost someone that's dear to me. And I did write a post about it on my Facebook feed if people kind of want to look that up, because I do offer a different perspective around the notion of suicidal tendencies,
Mm,
or as I like to reframe it, when we go through change, there is a sense of a part of us that has to die for the new to be rebirthed. Death and birth are bedfellows, and we're not to be afraid of that sensation that may come through as like we're dying, because it's part of our natural cycle. It's a part of our natural way of being, and we have to embrace it if we want to come back into wholeness.
mm-hmm,
So yeah.
mm. May more of us learn and share how we can surrender in trust to the metaphorical death that our soul is craving, and to not make the choice that permanently ends a
Yeah,
life. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Wow, beautiful. Well, I know that this has just been a powerful conversation. Thank you again so much for being here. Thank you, everyone watching. Yeah, reach out to Coco. We'll put your website in the links.
Mm-hmm.
You could also check out her books that she's collaborated with. And of course, if any of you want to speak more into witch wound healing, that's something you can speak to me about. But yeah, as we do move into spring in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope that we do feel that opening and allowing of more light, and that we can, as you so beautifully put it, learn to surrender, to traverse the underworld, to make the return.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Celebrating you and your return, Sarah, and and
Thank you, Flora.
and even knowing that you will likely make a descent again, and that
Mm.
that's okay, and it's all part of the journey, as will I, as will everyone. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, mwah.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank
blessed be.
you.
Mm.